Technique 36, 100%. These days I have a new phobia. I'm terrified of elevators, and I'll be taking steps to avoid them. Technique number 36 has a lot of information. Too much information for one video. So I will be splitting the videos into 4 different parts. The key concept behind this technique is that there's one acceptable percentage of students following a direction. 100%. Any less, and your authority is subject to interpretation, situation, and motivation. If you accept anything less than 100%, students can ask themselves, did he really mean that? For everyone? Do I feel like going along with this today? 100% compliance is the standard, not the goal. Now 100% compliance may sound terrifying, it may sound draconian, but it's the only sustainable variety. The consequences and benefits of compliance are huge. Less compliance leads to a much less effective classroom. Many teachers who fail to approach the 100% standard stop noticing whether they are achieving full compliance. Remedying this is the first step to achieving the highest behavioral expectations. If you want to wield power justly and firmly, you must be keenly aware of how students respond to your directions. This is an example from the Teach Like a Champion book. One morning, a 3rd grade teacher wanted to address her class. She raised her hand in the practice signal for silence. Students are expected to quietly raise their hands as well, and on the morning in question, about 3/4 of her class did so, with the room becoming quiet enough for her to speak and be heard. Should she proceed? Now, I have had situations like that in my classroom, and I have seen many others, and most teachers would do so. They would proceed. But if they did, they would overlook the 1/4 of their students who had failed to comply with an explicit direction. Unless the teacher in this example, and you yourself, want to send the message that following an explicit direction is optional, she shouldn't and you shouldn't begin until all hands are raised. There's an important distinction to make here. If the teacher had only asked for silence, it would be okay to proceed once the room was quiet. But the teacher asks students to do 2 things, be quiet and respond to her signal. Only some students did that, so she should wait before proceeding. If you want compliance, you have to ask for it and receive it. Now you might say to yourself, they're not in the way, just move on. They're not hurting anybody, they're not making a noise, they're not disrupting your classroom, let them be. Well, unless you want to send the message that following an explicit direction is optional, you can't begin until all hands are raised. The key to achieving any type of compliance is to make the other person want to do it. Now, if you begin yelling, if you begin screaming, if you begin name-calling, finger-pointing, you're going to lose that audience, and you're going to lose the rest of the class as well. Make sure that enforcing compliance does not overstep the initial infraction. Your response should be equal to what the student has done wrong. The reason why I suggest using 100% compliance is that the things that you want done in your classroom, the things that will bother you if they're not done, are stressors that can be avoided easily just by getting students to do things quickly and easily. Things that became the bane of your teaching existence can become another classroom routine. You're going to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of aggravation, and a lot of energy in trying to enforce things that you really need done. The dangers of moving on without compliance risk allowing a toxic culture to develop. It causes students to see non-compliance as an option, to contemplate a choice between compliance with the teacher or the freedom to do what they want with their peers. When you allow this culture of non-compliance to exist, it spreads quickly to previously supportive students, and things that were not a choice before become a choice in the mind of almost all students. You don't ask your students to do things just for your own sake. We have enough aggravation in our lives. What you have to tell students is that any request that I'm making is for a reason. And you have to treat every type of request, whether it be a minor request, whether it be a discretionary request, whether it be a really major classroom issue. You have to treat them all with this 100% mindset, because it's the small things that we do that influence how we do the big things. If you allow a culture of non-compliance to exist, to fester, to permeate throughout your classroom, at some point you'll have to go back and you'll have to reset unproductive expectations. This is time-consuming and I think unnecessary. So you've got to be vigilant. As soon as you finish this video, think about what type of compliance issues you want to address. You don't want to end up in a bad place. You don't want to end up with a classroom of non-compliance. Many teachers get there before they even realize they're on their way. So please, when this video is finished, take a look at yourself and take a look at your classroom, just like I will. Okay, remember that third grade teacher? We're going to go back to the example. Now, the book chose the example of a teacher with her hand raised for silence because it's a commonly used device, and because it shows the ease with which teachers learn to ignore non-compliance. So we're going to think about what could go wrong in this situation. I also want you to think about what could the teacher have done better? How could this situation have worked in her favor? What could she have done differently? The teacher in the example was asking for two different things. Including raising hands in the command means more variables and more outcomes to attend to. It may well be that raising hands helps achieve silent attentiveness, but the teacher should at least ask, is there a less invasive way to achieve silent attentiveness? Something more realistic? The book suggests eye contact compliance. It asks whether she might consider whether it would be more effective to have students quietly sit up straight with their eyes on her, to show they are ready to listen, rather than raise their hands. The book says this would still give her students an attention routine and herself a visual way to check for compliance. This method can be done more quickly, and I think it's better preparation for what life asks. Attentive people make eye contact, and they show you they are alert by following the speaker. You track the speaker with your eyes. There are a ton of reasons why you want to reflect on your classroom compliance issues. If you think about what processes make my classroom run most efficiently, what are the steps to achieving this type of compliance? Why do I want compliance with this issue in the first place? All of these things, all of these processes should be moving you towards a more efficient classroom. And if they're moving you towards a more efficient classroom, then they should be taken seriously. So you must take your own command seriously as well. If you ask, they should do it. Anything that you want done, and anything that you want done with 100% compliance, should be done well, to the best of your ability and to the best of students' ability. Anything less will lead to a corrosive effect in your classroom. If you allow for less than 100% or marginal compliance, you're introducing these questions into your students' minds. Students will be asking themselves, is it okay to just raise my hand halfway? Can I rest my elbow on the desk and raise one hand? Is there some way to do this and not look like I'm trying to be her pet? These are questions you don't want seeping into your students' minds. Anything you want done well. My grandfather Papi used to say, Bryan, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And this excellence of habit is something that has stuck with me. What you do, you should do well. And the easiest way to do it well is to do it well every time. The things you want done well will become the things that you do well. And the compliance issues that you address, you'll have to reflect upon. You reflect upon the justness and the discretion of your commands. So remember, ultimately the most sustainable form of compliance is one that, for both students and teachers, is clearly an exercise that will help everyone achieve. I have a closing routine with every student in every class, every day. This closing requires my students to give me a short bow, as I teach in South Korea. That's the pretty formalized greeting that we do. But as I'm transitioning from our closing work, or activity, or game, students will be milling about the classroom. And to get them all seated and ready to say goodbye, it sometimes takes a little while. So, since I'm dealing with elementary school students, I use their hands as attention grabbers. So I have them mirror everything that I want to do. Now, if I just told my students, sit down, put 2 hands into your chest and say goodbye, I would have maybe 1 or 2 students doing it. But what I do is I have them put their hands up, and then left, and then right, then in, then out, then 1 hand up, 1 hand down, 1 hand left, 1 hand right. And as I give these commands, it's like a cascade, a waterfall. 1 student sees, then 3 students see, then 5, 8, 10, 12, and the whole class. The point is that I'm not yelling at anybody. I'm not saying, Jamin, why aren't your hands in? I'm not saying, Jungkook, sit down, or Minsa, put your hands up, right? They're following along with everybody because it's a positive atmosphere. It's hands up, hands down, hands left, hands right, 1 hand up, 1 hand in, 1 hand right, 1 hand left, 2 hands out, until I find everybody following me along. This keeps the classroom positive, and we close on a friendly and lighthearted note. I hope you can have some fun doing the same. Non-compliance doesn't happen on the first day of class. It doesn't happen the first week, month, year, decade, lifetime. I've been at the same school for 3 years, and every once in a while, my little friend non-compliance comes to visit our classroom, and I have to remind him, you can only stay here for a cup of tea. You're not welcome for dinner. So I have to kick him out after a little while. The same will happen in your classroom. I hope. Good luck.